Welcome to Life's Not Linear. If you could just take a moment to introduce yourself and give us maybe a little bit of your backstory, and then we'll go from there.
How many minutes do you want that?
You know, whatever you want to do. I'm not in a rush.
Okay. All right.
Whatever you feel is quality.
Okay. My name is Mahmoud Khedr. I am a human being first. I always like to start with human because I think for too long and too often, especially now, we are always looking at differences that divide us, and that is not to say that I don't see race or I don't see color, but it is to emphasize what I think is missing in the world right now is us looking at our similarities and how we all see pain and feel pain similarly, how we all struggle similarly, and how we all dream similarly. And so for, most of my life, I have been working on problems and solutions around ending what I call unnecessary human suffering. And this, I think, got into fruition a lot more recently. But since I came to the U.S., I've always had a dream to be in business. I started selling candy in middle school, like a lot of other entrepreneurs, and then slowly got, and learned a little bit through high school about fundamentals of business. What does it mean to be a business person? And then learned a lot about social problems and saw that it doesn't really make sense to be a businessman or an entrepreneur if you're not working on social issues. And for me, that was clear because people are suffering, and why would we start a business to make money and do something that doesn't really bring value to society when there seems to be deeper issues that really need solving. My first few startups, I worked on a college social media app, and then ended up working on a startup called Runner to support and empower street vendors who were selling food, bring technology to them. And then I got involved in a few other things in college and did a few tech internships at Facebook and Google to, amp up my experience and get those tools that I thought were necessary to empower and address those problems. And I think that kind of took me through college. I did UIF, which we're both, connected through, and very proud to be a University Innovation Fellow. So there, worked in college on addressing student issues and helping students, other fellow students, like we like to say, understand their mission and not just their major, to see beyond what's happening in college, to have a more long-term perspective, to identify problems they cared about. So I worked a lot on empowering students through different programs that we started and initiatives and conferences, to just get them to see a perspective that I saw, and in the process, I was also learning. So that was a ton of fun for me. And I think to close most recently, and what I've been spending most of my life on now, and I think this kind of, when people talk about passion and purpose, it's really interesting how some people find what they feel like they're meant to do. And for me, it was a complete accident to work in the mental health space. And that was really out of a conversation with two of my best friends, where we just felt like the problems in the world and the problems that we face, it doesn't make sense that we have to go through so much suffering. And so starting FleurMind, the organization that I started a few years ago to address the youth mental health crisis, made a lot of sense. And I've been, working and learning the last few years on how to address, that crisis, what needs to happen, and really taking a deeper understanding of where are the issues, of why does this issue exist, and what type of solutions exist, and why are they not enough? Why do we still have, young people who are suffering in silence, average 10 years suffering in silence before they seek any help, right? Why are young people completing suicide? Why do young people feel like they don't belong? And so that's been a lot of my work the last few years, through mental health education, through supporting different initiatives with policy, and through working, on a lot of different things. So that's kind of the short intro.
Awesome.
Rather long, but
that's okay. I should have worn my FleurMind shirt. I totally forgot. Okay, so I'd love to know how you got to kind of like finding your why. So you the beginning of your introduction, you talked about, I'm a human first, and you made a lot of emphasis on like unity and mental health. And I'm wondering how, and you said you kind of got there by accident. Um, what in all of your experiences like really drove you to pursue this and continue pursuing this?
I think after my first startup, the one I was telling you about with empowering food vendors, street vendors, I decided after that I did not want to do another startup, and I ended up shutting it down because we couldn't get investment. It was a really hard space to operate in. Food delivery and restaurant space is just extremely difficult. I decided that I'll never do another startup unless unless it has so deep meaning, and that the suffering I go through with that can be overcome by the purpose it brings me and the meaning that it brings me. And the reason I said that to myself and I decided on it was because startups are really hard. Starting something new from the ground is extremely difficult. It's something that takes a lot of your time. There's no clear return on your investment. There's high risk, and just a lot of loss in the process. And I think, of course, you can learn a lot. You have chances of succeeding, but they're very low, and you can't clearly see them until you get traction. And so with FleurMind, I had just spent a lot of time reflecting on my life, and I felt like growing up in the US with a lot of the different experiences that I had around racism, discrimination, around financial struggle, and really not knowing how to cope with these things. So like really suffering through depression and anxiety in silence for almost 10 years, right? And thinking something was fundamentally wrong with me. And I carried that even through my first startup. And through college, I didn't really know what was wrong with me. And of course, the stigma, which now I'm really optimistic about, is lowering a lot of different communities. The stigma was so high that that conversation was not really available to be able to say, hey, I feel like crap. I feel like my life sucks. I feel like I shouldn't be here. I feel like, why do I have to be Muslim and Egyptian in America? Why do I have to experience this? That space wasn't there for me. And I think in college, as I learned a little bit more about different people, learned a little bit about health, and just started seeing more conversation around mental health, I was inspired, just thinking about it. And then that conversation with Danny and Kandakar, like I mentioned to you earlier, it was really what fueled, moving from just thinking to talking, and then talking to action. And we left that conversation just feeling angry that the problem existed. And just through a little bit of research, you just get angrier, right? Like some of the stats that we saw earlier, aside from that 10-year one, was, for example, this was probably the one that maybe stunned us the most, or one of the few. There was a lot of them. One of them was 50% of mental illness starts developing at age 14. And for us, that was like a big, what the hell's going on? Because we didn't think it really started that early, but our lived experience said it did. And the fact that the research is out there, the data is clear, it made us, question like, why are people, and the more we asked why, the more we're able to come to some answers. And of course, we don't have all the answers now, but we have a lot more clarity on why these problems exist. And so that's why I felt a need to work on FleurMind, and I got really inspired to continue working on it and just figure out how to do it the last few years.
Thank you for sharing that. Do you mind if we touch on more of kind of like your personal experiences that maybe are feeding into FleurMind as well? So coming from, moving to the US and assimilating and transitioning and throughout all your different ventures, how you've been able to kind of like reflect on your own mental state and how you've been able to like heal and push through those tough times.
Yeah, I think first thing that comes up is like tough times still exist, and tough times, what I realize is they will never stop existing. Life is just a big ball of struggle, and and as sad as that sounds, it when people say the truth, frees you. It really does free you, I think, to a certain extent, when you realize that, hey, I am going to go through some hard times for my entire life. And life most likely is those hard times are most likely going to get worse. Um, but the thing that I realize is that, and what I think is the solution to that in a way, is that we over time also become more resilient, and we become more experienced, we become smarter, and that's really if we're lucky to be able to identify the problems and address them. So for a lot of people, they're not able to do that because they don't have the tools, they don't have the education, they don't have the support system. The list goes on. But for me, I think, like I told you, like I struggled for a long time. I did not address it. There was no way for me to really address it besides, I mean, eventually it became very negative ways to address it that people now are very very aware of, right? So we talk about drugs, we talk about like all the negative ways, drugs, avoidance, being angry, making really stupid decisions, um, just being in the wrong spaces, doing the wrong things, and lashing out at people, having a really short, temper, and a lot of that comes out when you don't address your issues. And so whether it's like drugs, whether you're smoking and you're spending time being like, okay, well, I feel like crap. What do I do? Okay, well, people who feel like crap seems like they all smoke weed. So every time I feel like crap, I'm just going to do that. And that, I think, is like the number one, or one of the worst ways to deal with issues, because you're never really addressing what's happening. You're just avoiding it. So I avoided for a long time, and then eventually I just started taking step by step into identifying, like, hey, what are the healthy ways to do this, and let me try to do more healthy things, like opening up to other people and being vulnerable, sharing my experiences with people who are considered friends or family, and just trying really hard to start the conversation, to share what's happening, and that by itself makes me feel a lot better, and I know it makes a lot of people feel better, just talking to a friend or family. Eventually trying to speak with mental health professionals was important, though I never found consistency or found, like, quote unquote, the right mental health professional. I always learned something out of a session that I took and implemented in some way in my life. Sometimes it wasn't very successful. Like when people talk about go to a therapist, it's not that easy. Like finding the right therapist, finding a person who, and people also don't usually know there's a lot of different ways to treat mental health challenges and mental illness. So you may go to a therapist or someone that does something that you don't really like. For example, talk therapy. Talk therapy, for me, the reason I would go to a therapist is not for talk therapy. It's more for like learning skills. Like I would like to go, and this is what I was telling my therapist when I went. I was like, hey, like we had this long conversation. He kept asking me questions. I was like, cool, I'm getting stuff off my chest. I feel a little bit better, but I'm like asking this person, I'm like, hey, I need something actionable. Like I need you to help me formulate a plan that when I leave here, I can do something between this session and the next. And they were just like, I don't have a plan for you. And I left and I never went back because I felt like I'm the type of person, this is my personality and how I operate. I need to see how something, an idea, or a certain, type of thing turns into action, and I need to be applied to learning. So anyway, yeah, I mean, to kind of close out on this question, I'm still a work in progress, but there's a lot more that I do for my health, like working out, spending time with friends that I adore. For a long time, I did not really have. I had people in my life who I considered friends, but they were not really friendships. I think they were just people. I thought this is what friendships are supposed to be, but I never invested heavily in them because I prioritized other stuff, and I thought it was more important to build businesses. I thought it was more important to be a UIF. I thought it was more important to talk and do all that stuff. But I think you eventually realize that you need meaningful relationships in your life, and you need to feel like you're part of a community. You need to feel connected to people and other human beings because we're wired to be social. And if you're focusing your energy on something that's not social, it's okay, but you need to realize that at some point you need to do it. And if you don't, it will hurt you somehow. So those are just some of the ways that I currently deal and support my own well-being.
That's great to hear. And I'm glad that in therapy you realize like what worked for you and what didn't. Lately I'm having a lot of conversations with friends about how to take the first step in like taking care of their mental health. And I go to talk therapy, but it's, there are some therapists that treat everything as like a one size fits all and they go by the book. And
Right.
it's like you said, you need, actionable steps, holistic healing, Western and Eastern like methodologies. And it's great to like get things off your chest, but then after you unload that, it's like, what do I do with it? What do I look at? What does that mean? Like, and next time if I have the same feeling, like, what do I do?
Yep.
And so I'm glad that you realize that. And hopefully you can find something or somebody that will help you in the way that you know you need.
Yeah.
Uh, do you mind talking a bit about FleurMind and kind of where you guys started and what you've done since?
Yeah, absolutely. FleurMind, we started in 2018, and initially we started as an idea that we had a lot of different ideas. We had ideas of building a chat bot to make therapy accessible to everyone. So like using artificial intelligence, so you can like just talk to a bot that will help you feel better, and then eventually, I think one of our second or third ideas was to help people with booking a therapist actually, because we knew it was really hard and that people usually get matched to therapists that don't fit their needs. And we had a hypothesis then, and this was all the way in 2018, which was that if you are able to book a person with a therapist that is a little bit more like them in some way or another, then the session would potentially be more successful. And this was the whole idea around cultural relevance, right? Like, how do you make sure that how do we make sure that we get someone a session where they feel validated and they feel like this person has some context about what's happening, and they have the humility to be able to navigate a complex situation that they don't understand? Because therapists a lot of the time, and most of them, first of all, most therapists are white. Second of all, most of them will never understand. I mean, actually, 100% will never understand exactly what you're going through. And because a lot of issues around mental health and challenges are so specific, they're so nuanced, and a lot of them are around someone's culture, around how they grew up, around their religion. It really needs that sensitivity, it needs that humility to be able to navigate a situation like that and understand it without avoiding it. Um, so this goes directly into what we ended up doing, which is we kind of realized that we didn't really want to do tech initially because we said, hey, maybe we really need to understand the problem deeper, and we wanted to start young. We didn't want to support older people just because I think we related more with young people, and then also because of the different stats that I shared with you, where like young people are suffering. Let's see like how we can support them specifically. And we just were thinking about education, and we thought about our schooling, and we were like, it doesn't make sense that we had a physical and sex ed class and we didn't have a mental health class. Like this is one of
Yeah.
the most important things in our life.
And sex ed
Here
was not even, it was horrible. That's a
yeah,
whole different discussion.
both phys ed and sex ed are not that great.
No.
But even it's just like having a certain foundation to where like maybe it can break the stigma if it's talked about, which maybe it will spark an idea in someone's head to do something different about their life. Um, so we thought, mental health, they're probably, I mean, they're all interconnected, surprisingly, eventually we found out. But, you really need to teach that to young people. And we saw that after doing some research that people were already interested in doing it. It just wasn't widely adopted. It wasn't in the space that we thought it should be. So we started developing curriculum to teach young people mental health, and really thought a lot about how do we teach it in a way that's fun, that's engaging, that actually resonates with young people, that's actionable, and that is somehow culturally relevant. How do we do that? And that's what we ended up doing. Our curriculum and the workshops we ended up facilitating were really focused on skill training. They were also focused on discussions. They were focused on using youth and pop culture to include in the conversation to make it more fun and engaging and relevant to their process, to what they think about and value. And we did that. We mainly we didn't sell the curriculum. We facilitated the curriculum ourselves because we thought there would be power in getting young people to talk to young people and also more diverse people in the classroom that would support the youth. So we did that for almost 2 years and facilitated, I think, near 100 different sessions, reaching just above like 1,200 young people. So a lot of these are very intimate, under 30 youth in the class. Some of them were designed as long programs. Like we did one program that was 10 weeks with the same group of students over 3 classes. And others were a little bit shorter. But now, we've been trying to figure out the last few months. We ended up doing online workshops for a few months. And now we're kind of moving on to figure out how can we support youth mental health from a very scalable perspective that does include technology and can impact a lot of youth and is sustainable. And so it's, at this point, it's very different thinking that we have. And we've had this thinking for a while that this is where we want to go, but we felt like it was essential to start somewhere and start small and start by learning and being humble and having humility. So that's where we've been, and where we're going is now trying to figure out this next phase for FleurMind. How do we build something that is really impactful?
That's awesome. You guys are just incredible. The fact that you started this while you were still in school, right? And then is this so how, after graduating, are you working on FleurMind full time? Are you doing anything else? Like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I'm at FleurMind full time at the moment, and we're just grinding it out. We're just working really hard to figure it out, and hope that we'll be able to come up with something that is sustainable and helps us all live, beyond.
Thank you for sharing all of this with me today. I want to end on either 2 things. One, if there's anything else that you would like to share that I didn't ask about, and then a piece of advice that you would want to give to young people today. It can be about anything.
I think I'll start with the last question. I'm not
Okay.
sure. Yeah, I'm not really sure what else to share right now. Piece of advice to young people, I would say, I would probably echo pieces of what I said earlier. And so if I had to say a message to young people, I would tell them life is really hard, and life will continue to be hard for you, and it will not be an easy experience. And anyone who tells you otherwise is lying to you. So I'd rather not lie to you. I'd rather deliver the truth. And the beautiful thing with that is that I know you'll be able to get through life if you ask the right questions, if you question systems and what exists in society and stigmas and ideas, and if you constantly keep trying. Like, don't give up. It's you hear it a lot, but it's so important because a lot of the things you're going to try are most likely not going to work, or you're not going to try them the right way, and you're going to have to do it again more consistently, or do it with more accountability, whatever it is. So don't give up. Don't give up easily. I think young people now, there's so many opportunities, so many different jobs, so many different ideas they want to work on, so many different things happening in their life, relationships, etc. People quit fast. And quitting is important when it's right. Quitting is important, and it's important to know when to quit, but it's also important to know when to keep going. And so be able to identify that. And I would hope you would never quit on living. I think that's something you should never quit on. I think there's a lot of other things that you can quit on, like a toxic relationship, like a career that you hate. Don't stay and do stuff that you hate, that deep down in your gut, this is not for me. And it's very different from saying this is hard. So to close my message, I would say do the hard things, and and continue living.
Stop doing shit you hate.
It's very important. Very, very important.
Yeah. I quote your Ignite pretty often to different people. I actually do have one more question. Sorry, it popped into my head. But I wanted to touch on, if you're comfortable with this, how your experience has been as an Egyptian man, an immigrant coming to America, and first of all, assimilating to being in America, but then also you're breaking down and stereotypes and tackling stigmas. That both stigmas like that you would feel in Egypt or that you would have here. I feel like there's just a lot of like, it's like double when you come to America and you're a person of color and then you're tackling these huge stigmas. So I'm just wondering like how you've been able to navigate that, be comfortable with your identity, that kind of stuff. Because I really want students who, especially with this like civil rights movement going on, the people of color and Black people, and just helping them to like how to love themselves and how to push through those like stereotypes, I guess.
It's a great question, and there's a lot of different parts to it. I think one, being an immigrant in general, for anyone who's an immigrant, it's a really hard experience to move somewhere new. And this is something I ended up learning a lot about in psychology when I was studying psychology, because the main thing is because you have to assimilate and you have to play a few different identities. So you have the identity that you need to be and you need to embrace at home, and that includes cultural beliefs, values, religion. And then you have American identity and value and culture, and you have to figure out when to be what. Well, not when to be what. More like you have to identify that they're two separate things. And I think that's a good place to start. For me, it was really hard to figure out who do I be and what do I do. So I ended up, and I think a lot of immigrants do this, is trying to shove and cancel as much of my culture and identity as possible to be accepted into society. And so really disconnecting from the idea that I'm Egyptian, really disconnecting and pushing far away the idea that I'm Muslim, disconnecting away from my family, and trying really hard to not be put in that box. And I did that through a lot of different ways. I would lie to people about my ethnicity. Like, people would ask me what I am, like, yeah, I'm French, a little bit Egyptian. I would sometimes just skip the question. I would tell people my name. For example, for a long time, I would tell people my name is Mahmoud. And it's like the American easy way to say it.
Yeah.
And they would hear it, and they'd be like, oh, it sounds foreign. And then I would tell them, oh, it's actually Mahmoud. I would be made fun of, and that's the reason I ended up doing Mahmoud. And so it goes to as simple as things like that, but then it also manifests into bigger things around, okay, well, I don't want to pray and I don't want to practice Islam because I don't want to be labeled as such, because I've heard what people call Muslims, and I've seen it on TV. I've seen what people do to Muslims in America, and I've experienced it. Like, people have called me names, people have called me Bin Laden, people have called me a terrorist. I've gotten like years of it that I've worked hard on, like, how can I separate the two? How can I be as American as possible? And so it was unfortunate. I would not recommend that. I think you need to learn how to adapt, and sometimes you need to code switch. But I think you really need to. I don't like needing or shoulding people, but I guess for me, I wish I would have accepted myself more, and just realized, like, hey, we have differences, and people can call me names and stuff, but I still should own up and be proud of who I am, because just because I'm different and you have a certain view of me doesn't define me, right? And it doesn't make me unworthy. And no matter what you tell me about my people or my race or my ethnicity, I should not, let that get to me, even though it will always get to me. I know it will always get to me. Even today, if someone says something to me, I have more knowledge and experience to be able to dissect it and see where it's coming from, and try to, fight hate with compassion, or try to address it more seriously. But it'll still get to me to some extent and make me think, like, why is this person saying this about me? What does it say about my self-worth? How do I, and it'll probably open up wounds from the past and make me think about my experience and why I was depressed for 10 years and why I ended up thinking it was better not to live than to live. So I think experiences like that will still exist. And for me, it was a hard journey to eventually realize and embrace and be proud to be where I'm from. And still today, this journey is ongoing. Like, I'm still trying to figure out parts of me and my culture and my community that for so long I have pushed aside, and I have been pushed aside from, that I think it's going to take me probably a lifetime to figure out whatever that. It's less of a target. It's more of a, I think it's more of just a life experience. I'm trying to just be like, hey, this is where I'm from. This is what I've done. I'm proud of it. I'm happy about it. And I'm going to continue to do it despite how you think or feel about me, because your thoughts and feelings about me do not, do not define who I am. And that took me a really hard time, a really hard and long time to process. So, yeah, I would hope that anyone who's an immigrant, who's in college, who sees stuff that may be happening in current climate, or stuff like, oh, international students shouldn't be here, or, all Muslim countries have a ban on them still, the Muslim ban is still alive, or, stuff that is being said to black people, or the racial injustices, or what's happening, it's just, there's so much of it that I think actually one last point I'd like to make on that is, it's not just about your feelings and thoughts. What's happening is real. Like, when we talk about, and this, a lot of the conversations recently have been about systemic injustice, systemic racism, that is real, and that is going to affect you. It's not just like, because people sometimes try to make it very individual and say, oh, you have flaws in your thinking and how you feel about yourself. And yes, you can improve that, but you have to realize that those systems and what happens in different people's life, where they grow up, their parents, their situation, different experiences they go through, that will impact them. And instead of, we should be working on both directions, helping people heal and helping people with their mental health. But the best thing to do is to address the root cause that would cause someone to feel that way. We need to get rid of racism. Like, racism should not exist. Poverty should not exist. Food insecurity should not exist, because those are the things that, for sexual abuse, the list goes on. Those are the things that cause suffering and challenges and mental illness and suicide. A lot of those are the root causes if you're going to talk about them. And in the most ideal world, we work on and we try to end, to as much as possible, every single one of those root causes that exist in the world that make people feel like shit. So that's why we need to work at both directions. It's not going to happen overnight. It's a marathon, like Nip would say, a marathon with a lot of sprints in it, a lot of areas where we need to work on. So all that to say, I'm optimistic about our future. I'm optimistic about our youth. They've been organizing, they've been going out, they've been calling everyone out, and that's beautiful. That's what needs to happen. And we need to also call ourselves out and just understand that both have to happen at the same time. We need to heal, we need to work on ourselves, protecting our energy, protecting our space, and we need to work on dismantling systems and places that are not for us, that are hurting us, that are destroying our lives and our communities.
I 100% agree. Going back to what you said about how, like, learning to accept yourself and your culture and loving yourself is not a destination. It's definitely just like a continuous journey. And I think it's hard because you would, sometimes you're like, oh, I feel really good. Like, I completely accept myself. And then you see something on social media or somebody says something to you and you feel like you lost all progress. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge that it isn't linear and you're going to have to remind yourself occasionally. And like you said, like, other people's opinions of you don't define you. So I feel like if I can remember that, then I will have faith and trust in myself. And as for healing yourself, while also dismantling all of these, like, systemic problems and these root causes, I think that's also a super important balance that people are learning right now. Because I think the topic of healing is, like, relatively new, but also being able to protect yourself and heal while also giving your energy to dismantling these systems is, I think, a conversation people should have daily with themselves, and checking in daily and, like, okay, like, today, what energy do I have to give myself and here and here, So I'm glad you brought that up.
That's a great point. And I think there's two on that point.
Mm-hmm.
I realized recently, and this is something also that took me a long time, is that the act of trying to find joy and happiness is a form of resistance. Being and existing is a form of resistance, right? The fact that you exist in a system where you're not welcome and there's a lot against you, you're resisting by existing. Finding your own joy and finding your happiness and working on your healing is a form of resistance. Accept that and don't feel bad that you're not doing what everyone else is doing or telling you to do. And then also fighting and calling things out and going out and protesting, that's also a form of self-care, because you see a problem in your life and you're going out to address it. People, when they go protest, they feel a lot of emotions. One of the emotions people feel is empowered. They feel like, I can do something about this. I can take action. I can go out in the streets, and they see other people there. They feel a sense of community. They feel a sense of belonging. They feel camaraderie, and these all support your mental health in phenomenal ways. So they're both different ways to support your well-being, and they're both like just extremely valuable.
I completely agree. Um, Thank you so much for being on Lifestyle with me today. I know we could talk forever about everything, so we'll have to just do another interview. Um, but I really appreciate you being on today and giving your time and energy to me and sharing with us.
I love this. I loved it. It gave me joy, made me feel welcome, and it made me feel more validated every time I share my experience. So thank
You are
you.
important, and you are impacting people's lives, and you're impacting your own life, and you're loved. I love you, of course.
I love you as well. Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate you.
Have a good day.
All right. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.